Hello, my name is May Rose, and for today's episode, I'm going to share with you my IVF journey here in Norway. So, this video is meant to share awareness and information. I'd be talking about my personal experiences doing the IVF treatment, as well as some of my opinion about how the process goes when it comes to doing the treatment in a public hospital here in the country. And I hope that somebody will find this video helpful and informative. So let's begin.
I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day.
Before starting the IVF treatment, it is important to remember that the process might be different from person to person, depending on some factors, like, for example, how your body responds to the hormones or the medicines that you put into it, your lifestyle, if you have had children from before, and stuff like that. So my husband and I, we've tried for a year and a half before eventually asking for advice from a healthcare professional or healthcare professionals. So I'm also a healthcare worker myself, and I think I have tried all the possible means and ways to conceive naturally, like living a healthy lifestyle, losing some weight, timing, and I have used lots of money for ovulation kits and pregnancy tests as well. I've also used apps and stuff like that. And every time I see a negative pregnancy tests by the end of the month, I felt like it was a hard blow, and I stress it a lot thinking about what's going wrong. My husband and I, we are an interracial couple, and sometimes I feel like it's because our baby making cells are just not compatible. But anyways, to relieve myself from overthinking and super energy draining, stressing out on what to do, I decided to go to my fastlege or my GP, and he didn't waste any time to refer me to a specialist. That was in 2021. I was 31 years old then. So I went to the gynecologist, and she did some tests and examinations. She did the pap smear, she did an ultrasound and a pelvic examination. There were blood tests as well. And we found out that my AMH was at 7. And I don't know if it's reliable or if it's the reason why we are having difficulty conceiving, but I've read that it's a little bit low for my age, and it means that I might be having low fertility reserve. So she referred us further to Oslo Universitetssykehus. It's a public hospital here in Norway, for further testing for primary infertility or primar infertilitet, which means that we didn't have children from before. So this is our first time actually trying to conceive. And by the end of the year, they've done all the tests, they've examined us, there was a sperm test, everything, and we got the diagnosis: involuntary childlessness with unknown cause, or ufrivillig barnløshet ukjent årsak. So we had another appointment in January 2022. We had the talk. We were given much information about IVF and also ICSI, and I experienced the doctor to be very understanding and empathetic. And she said in Norwegian that, "Oh, you've already waited so long. We will not make you wait some more, so we'll just set you up for IVF treatment." So that meant a lot to me, and she explained what it meant and the things that we needed to prepare, the things that we needed to do prior to the next appointment. So here in Norway, you have to actually apply for IVF. So it's not given that everybody are entitled or is entitled to this kind of treatment. So we had to apply for it by satisfying 3 requirements. Number 1, you have to have a referral from the doctor, so that's check. And then we had to fill out an egen erklæring, or a statement by both of us about our backgrounds. That. And the third one is we have to apply for a police clearance or barneomsorgsattest. So that's in accordance to bioteknologiloven, or the law on biotechnology. And it also says something about us being capable to take care of a child. So I sent the papers and the police clearance on February 21, 2022, and exactly 1 month later, on March 21, 2022, we received a letter saying that we have the right to IVF treatment in a public hospital here in Norway, and that we will get an appointment by week 33. So a little bit of waiting time. That's March, and we have to wait till summer before we could get our appointment for the IVF treatment. So the reason why you actually need to send an application for an IVF treatment in a public hospital here in Norway is because the government subsidizes much of the treatment. It's not totally free. You have to shoulder the medicines, the cost of the medicines for the first round, which is around 23,000 kroner. And then if you manage to reach the 20,000 cutoff, then everything else would be refunded. So that's going to be the cost of the medicines for the second and the third round. So that's not really a bad thing. And aside from that, you have to pay 15% egenandel, or 15% of the costs of consultation fees and process fees, the procedural fees when you go to the hospital. So it's not entirely free, and that's for each treatment, by the way. Well, if you don't like the hassle of standing in a queue, the long waiting time, processing time, then doing it privately is also an option. So there are private clinics here in Norway which offer IVF treatment, but of course it would be more expensive. I think around 100,000 for 3 tries. I'm not so sure, you have to check it, but I know that some people prefer doing it privately. But if you would ask me, I would say that you could try doing it publicly at first and then save up and maybe do it privately if it didn't work out. Because I've heard from people who are doing it privately that private clinics are less strict than public clinics. So I don't know about that yet. So I'm just going to share with you my experience in a public hospital. Our first official IVF appointment was on June 20, 2022. That's about a month after I turned 32 years old. So that was also not on week 33. So it's a bit earlier than what was stated on the letter that we received in March. And on that appointment, we were given more information about the IVF treatment. And we talked about the 2 protocols, the long protocol and the short protocol. I wasn't given so much information about why some women had to follow one of each, but I was put on long protocol. And I was advised to download the IVF app, which I find helpful now, but before there were some, missing information and stuff like that. But now it's a bit helpful. It's nice. You can try and download it and see. But I think it's in Norwegian. Yeah. So I was also told to call them and inform them of my menstruation in August. That's 2 months later. And also we were reminded that we had to make use of the treatment within 7 months after we have received the letter. Otherwise, they will give our slot to another couple. So I was very excited to start. However, around that time as well, I started a new job in the hospital. And yeah, there was so much going on with me. I also got very, very sick with gallbladder stones or gallbladder inflammation, cholecystitis around November. So I had to tell them, and the treatment was delayed. But the nurses and the doctors are very understanding in the hospital, and they said that they will just wait. So while I was hospitalized in November with the cholecystitis, the surgeon informed me that they could do the operation around February. So I informed the hospital doing the IVF that about the operation. So they said, it's okay, we're going to wait for you and you have to take care of yourself first. And that's what I did. But then around in the beginning of 2023, I received a letter from the other hospital doing the gallbladder surgery that the next open slot would be in April. And then eventually it became June. Yeah, so it was a long waiting time. But during that time, I tried to stay positive. I tried to make use of the time to prepare my body and my soul, my psyche for both the IVF treatment and gallbladder surgery. So by the end of June, the gallbladder operation was performed and I recovered very well. And I contacted the hospital again for the IVF treatment. So it was already 2023 and it was summer. I contacted the hospital and they generously gave me 2 schedules, which is the tentative schedule for both the egg retrieval and the transfer. So they said we can do it on week 38 or week 41 and it's up to you. And I was like thinking, well, if I could choose, then I would choose a later date or a later week when I have fully recovered from the gallbladder surgery. So it was around October when I started with the medicines. So they told me I should inform them when my menstruation comes in August and then in September, so they can kind of track my cycle. Fast forward to the real deal. Let me show you my timeline for the first IVF round. So I had my period and I was told to wait until cycle day number 22 so I can start with the down-regulating drug or injections, gonapeptyl. For some women, they use nasal spray, but there was shortage at the time, so I was told to use gonapeptyl or the injection. So 1 injection in the morning, and I had to set my alarm because I was also working shifts. So I had to do it at 6 in the morning, and I'm still doing it at 6 in the morning during the second IVF round and the third IVF round. I do it at 6 in the morning. It's just easier that way. So yeah, I'll talk more about the medicines in later on. But with gonapeptyl, I can advise that you let it sit in room temperature for about 10 to 15 minutes. so it's less painful when you administer it subcutaneously. So during this period, the down regulation, your body is being put into a turned off, or yeah, it mimics menopause. So yay. And it was actually, I don't know, around this period I become more motivated to do some things. I become more self-confident, but at the same time, around this time, I also suffer from too much headache and dizziness at work. Very, very easy to become stressed out and become irritable. So that's the downside. And after a week of using gonapeptyl, I got my period. And yeah, I've read on a forum that some women, they experience delayed menstruation after using gonapeptyl. So, but it's different from woman to woman. It depends on how your body reacts to the hormone. But it's important that you get your period at least 3 days before you start the next hormone, which is the stimulating hormone. So I've experienced that during the first round of IVF, there were more uh, control, uh, ultrasound control of how your body is responding to the medicines compared with the second and the third, which I went through like only one ultrasound to check if the eggs are ready. But anyway, I had the first scan, the first control, 12 days after I started gonapeptyl. And the ultrasound was fast and effective. The nurse said that, or the doctor said that the mucous membrane was around 3 millimeters, and they found 5 follicles. And then I was sent to the nurse so she could give me more information about the next step in the process. And the nurse said that the ultrasound was good, and that sometimes the follicles are hiding, and that they don't manage to see it on the first scan, but they eventually turn up in the next control and stuff like that. So it gave me a little bit of hope. But anyways, she told me that I could already start with the next injection, which is meant to stimulate the ovaries in producing follicles. And yeah, it's called Gonal F. So this one is the expensive one. I think it's the most expensive of all the medicines involved in this process. And so I had to take both Gonal F and gonapeptyl simultaneously. So gonapeptyl in the morning and Gonal F in the evening. So I did that 8 a.m., 6 a.m., and then 6 p.m. in the evening. And then I was also advised that I should refrain from strenuous activities, no physically demanding work, no hopping, no running, no stress, which was almost impossible with the kind of work I have. But anyway, so I tried my best to do as advised. And now, aside from just headaches, I also experience, the typical menstrual PMSing symptoms. I felt very, very bloated, very, very, yeah, that you can really feel that your ovaries are growing. So it wasn't very easy. I also had back pains pala, I remember. So I was also told, by the way, before starting IVF, that I should start taking folate and iodine supplements. So I took that in addition to vitamin D, because I'm from Asia, so I need more vitamin D than usual, because we have we have less sun here in Norway. So after 7 days of using Gonal F and Gonapeptil simultaneously, I was scheduled for the second scan. And at the time, I had to take a blood test before 9:30 in the morning to check my estradiol level. Estradiol. I don't know how to pronounce it in English, but it is estradiol in Norwegian. And yeah, that was before 9:30 a.m. and then the scan is at 2:30 p.m. So that's like a huge gap. So I would go to the hospital and just stay there, go to the library and read and wait for my appointment. But anyways, I've used that time to document my journey. That's why I can tell you as much as information as I can right now because of that. So fast forward to my appointment, the doctor seemed to be having a very hectic day. I would assume that it was because of short staffing. I don't know. She did a scan. She checked the mucous membrane, which has now, which has thickened to about 9 millimeters. So that was 3 millimeters 1 week ago. So now it's 9. And then she also told me that she didn't find any follicle in the right ovary, but she did find 4 to 5 follicles in the left ovary. So I was a little bit surprised that she didn't find any because there was something there before and now it was gone, or maybe it was hiding. I'm not so sure. So she also found a 2.5 centimeter cyst in the ovary, and they weren't sure if it's harmful or not, but most probably not dangerous, she said. So I just had to wait. That's one of the side effects of the injections. By the way, you could get cysts in your ovary. But anyway, she increased the dosage of the stimulating hormones, stimulating drug to the maximum allowed. And we planned the next control after 4 days, I think, 3 or 4 days, because the follicles are not big enough. They were just 9 millimeter, 9, 7, and 6 millimeter in size. So it has to be around 20 before we could start planning for the retrieval. So that day wasn't what I expected. I was expecting that she was gonna say, oh, your follicles are growing very well. They're now 20 millimeters and we see a lot of them and there's gonna be a retrieval in 3 days. But yep, that was not what happened. So my husband picked me up and we went home. And around that time, I was already having a tough time going to work and doing the treatment at the same time. So I had a consultation with my GP, with my fast lege, and he was very, very understanding. And he told me that I need to take some time off from work so I can focus on myself and I could refrain from the stress and also tackle the physical symptoms, the headaches, the dizziness, the feeling bloated and everything, and also tackle the psychological, but just secondary in this process, it seemed. So he also told me to be optimistic and that he told me that I was at actually the prime age of trying, so I shouldn't lose hope easily. So, yeah. So on the third scan, same procedure. I went for a blood test at before 9:30 in the morning, and then my scan was at 2 p.m. And during the scan, I found out that my estradiol level is now at 1.75. Previously, it was at 0.75, so that's a good 0.45, so that's a good thing. And the doctor said that there's an 8 millimeter follicle in the right ovary. So it was like there was nothing last time. There were before, and then there was nothing, and now there's an 8 millimeter follicle. While the left ovary had 5 follicles ranging from 9 to 13 millimeters. So they were hoping that the 13 and the 12 millimeter from the left ovary would grow before the retrieval. And there was also sad news that the cyst has also grown, and it's now 3 centimeters in size. And the doctor said that it's most likely taking up the space for more possible follicles. So that really made me sad. And she also said that cyst is already pressing on the few ones that I already had. So yeah. Then I was scheduled for the next scan, the fourth scan, and that would be after 4 days. And I was already given the tentative date for egg retrieval. That's after 6 days. So really long protocol. And yeah, so more waiting. So now, during the fourth scan, I was very, very nervous, but at the time I didn't have to do the blood test, and my husband was with me to the hospital, so I was a little bit relieved. I was calm. He wasn't present in all of the appointments, but he does show up when he can, and I really appreciate that. So anyway, on the fourth scan, they found now 2 follicles in the right ovary, and one was 12 millimeters and the other one is 6 millimeters. While on the left side, there were few, and there were 2 which were at 19 millimeters. So that was the focus of the planned retrieval. Actually, there was also a 15 millimeter and there was a 7 millimeter. So if I could get lucky, the 15 millimeter would also make it to the retrieval date, but if not, then nope. But anyways, the doctor had to confer with another doctor about the schedule for retrieval, and the other doctor was not in, he or she didn't agree that the schedule should be delayed some more so we could wait for that 15 millimeter follicle. So yeah, the retrieval would be just as planned. I was given pre-medication at the time as well. I was given 2 grams of paracetamol, then I was given Voltaren, and there was midazolam to calm my nerves. Voltaren is a painkiller. And I was told to take them 45 minutes before the procedure, and we were given instructions on what to do on the egg retrieval day. I was very, very anxious, but at the same time very, very excited. Yes, and I was told to take the third injection, ovitrella, Norwegian, or ovitrel in English maybe. It's the egg releasing hormone. It contains that hormone, so it would trigger the final stage of the ovulation process. And it was actually very good because it was perfectly timed after you injected yourself with Ovitrel. Then in 36 to 38 hours, ovulation will happen. So it's very, very important that you follow the exact time that the nurse gives you when to inject it. So I did it, and I was already around the end of the process, and I was positive that I skipped or I didn't get hyperstimulation this time. So that was a good thing. So egg retrieval, I I was really grateful and happy that we've reached that stage in the process. But it's still very early to celebrate at the time. My greatest fear at the time would be if none of the follicles contain an egg. So having follicles that you can see in the scan doesn't necessarily mean that they actually contain an egg. So even if they found two 19 millimeter follicles, that doesn't mean that I'm going to get, it doesn't guarantee two eggs. So one of them could just contain nothing. So that was my fear during the egg retrieval process. And I was also scared about the complications, bleeding, pain, hyperstimulation. So, but although I was aware that I could get some of those things, right? So, anyway, fast forward to the egg retrieval process. We went to the hospital at around 9 a.m. My husband went in first and delivered his, you know, his seed, his seeds. And then I went in after taking the pre-medication 45 minutes before. And if the scans, this is not to scare you, but if the scans were already very unpleasant, then egg retrieval is unpleasant plus a little bit painful. So it was like literally poking needles into your ovary. So it was not something that I really liked. But anyways, it had to be done, and as I feared, they took out the follicles, and most of them didn't contain any egg, sadly. And every time the doctor said no egg, it was just very hurtful. But then again, there was one follicle that had an egg, and the doctor said, "An egg?" And I looked at my husband and I smiled, and oh, that was nice. At least they found one. And yup, the whole process ended with just one egg. So my hope was very low at that point. In addition to that, the cyst, however, was thriving. They had to puncture it, they had to aspirate it, they removed the fluid or the liquid that was inside it, and luckily it was just clear yellow liquid. The cyst had grown between 4 to 5 centimeters. By the way, it's like this, it's big. And the doctor managed to fill like 4 vials with the fluid that came from it. And because of that, I had to take antibiotics. I had to take, I can't remember if it was what antibiotic that was, but I had to take it for 4 to 5 days to avoid infection. So prophylaxis. So I was led back to the waiting room, and after a short period, I was back on my feet. We received the sheet from the nurse that contained how many eggs was retrieved, and I was told to start taking cyclogest or cyclogest. It's a progesterone vagitory that would help thicken the mucous lining, prepare the womb for the transfer, and help the womb carry the embryo. So at the same time, I had to take the antibiotics, right? So anyway, while I was waiting in the room, I got a little bit scared because there was a woman who was crying from terrible pain, and I felt very sorry for her. It could happen, bleeding could happen, much pain could happen, but I was just lucky that I dodged the bullet, and I went home without the kind of terrible pain. It was still painful, but it was manageable. So the nurse said that she was going to call me the following day. They were going to call me in the evening if my egg and my husband's sperm failed to get fertilized, get together, you know. Otherwise, if I didn't receive that call, then they would call me the following day and tell me the result and then plan the embryo transfer. So it was nerve-wracking, but my hope was not very high. It was just one egg, and anyway, I tried to keep myself busy while waiting. I was doing puzzles and, you know, sleeping, just resting. And as it turned out, it was a warrior egg. It was a golden egg. So they actually called my husband's phone number, not mine. I don't know why. But they called him, and then we both talked to them in the phone, and they told me that we had an embryo. So I felt elated, and but they had to put the embryo back, or they had to transfer it to my body after only like 3 days, 2 to 3 days. Anyways, so I felt very happy that we had an embryo on the first round of IVF. So 2 days after we received the phone call, we were at the hospital again, and waiting for our turn for the embryo transfer. I was very, very excited, and it wasn't as painful as the egg retrieval actually. I was actually a bit worried that they would forget to ask for identification. Around the time there was a news article saying that the hospital personnel mistakenly put a different embryo to another woman and stuff like that, and I really didn't want that to happen, but apparently that's the least of my concern. um, they did remember. They asked for my birth date, for my name, and for my personal identification number. We have that here in Norway. So they did it. But I remember they didn't use an ultrasound to find their way. They didn't use an ultrasound as well in the second round of IVF. So I guess it's all experience, intuition, competence. I don't know, but they put it back, and then the doctor said, "Is it?" She asked, "Is it empty?" It was. They checked. It was empty, and that was it. I was told to stop using antibiotics, but to continue using the progesterone vagitories, and yeah, just light activities, no bathing, no sex, no heavy lifting. And we went home right after that very, very short procedure, and I was given a form for the blood test that was to be taken after 12 days. Actually, it was 2 weeks, right? It's a 2-week wait, or what they call in Norwegian here in Norway as rugetiden. That's when you nest the egg or the embryo, actually. But since they put back how do I explain this? The 2-week wait is from the egg retrieval date. So that's why I only had 12 days to wait from the embryo transfer. So yeah, I tried to monitor myself during that period. I have had symptoms like menstrual symptoms. I have some women say that they know when the embryo sticks to the womb because they feel some pinching. I had those pinchings, and yet, anyways, I had high hopes that although there was only one embryo, that it would stick, that it would fight, it would grow. So yeah, we waited patiently. I went to the hospital after 12 days, and they took the blood test to check if I was pregnant, but unfortunately it didn't stick. So it was a failed attempt, failed first attempt for IVF. So now I'm going to share with you the timeline for the whole IVF process. It took 43 days for the long protocol, and it involved 4 scans. And I also have on this table the medicines, the medications that I took, starting with gonapeptyl on cycle day 22, and then gonal F, and ovitrel, and then cyclogest or cyclogest, and also the antibiotics and the premedication that I took. So yes, it was more than 1 month for the whole long protocol process. So this was the first round of IVF for me. That's how it went. I learned a lot, and my husband said that I should, stay positive, be happy, and that when we went home, we are going to book a ticket to the Philippines for me. Around that time, while I was doing the IVF, my grandmother was already very, very sick. And yeah, when I went home to the Philippines in December, a month after the whole first IVF shebang, she died. So there was so much stress around that time, so much sad things happening for me. That's how 2023 ended for me. So much lessons, so much experiences, and I'm very, very grateful that I have experienced, that I have gone through all of those things. So in 2024, I prepared myself because I was getting ready to do the second and eventually the third IVF treatment. So anyways, I hope you like this video. If you want to follow my journey, please like and subscribe, and you can also comment if you have any questions about the IVF process here in Norway, and I'll try my best to respond promptly. If not, it's okay. But yes, I hope to see you in the next episode. I'll share with you what I went through during the second round of the IVF treatment in a public hospital here in Norway. Thank you for watching. Ciao!